Love, trust, and celebration. That's what an engagement party is supposed to be about. But sometimes, behind the smiles and sparkling glasses, dark intentions hide in plain sight. In this story, the joy of one woman's engagement takes a dangerous turn when the very man who was supposed to welcome her into the family sets a sinister plan in motion. With just one glass of champagne, a secret unravels, shaking the foundation of relationships, testing loyalty, and igniting a journey of revenge no one saw coming. The room glowed with the warm light of golden chandeliers, their soft radiance bouncing off the crystal glasses and polished silverware. Laughter drifted from every corner, mingling with the notes of a piano that played gently in the background, giving the hall an almost dreamlike charm. Tonight was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of Emma's life, her engagement party, the night she and Daniel were meant to celebrate the promise of forever. The tables were draped in white satin, roses bloomed in tall glass vases, and everywhere she turned, faces were smiling, congratulating, and raising their glasses in her honor. For a moment, she let herself soak it all in, the happiness, the joy, the way the world seemed to pause in celebration of their love. Emma wore a dress the color of moonlight, simple yet elegant, the kind that made her feel like herself and not some ornament on display. Her fingers nervously brushed the diamond ring Daniel had slipped on her hand just weeks ago, a constant reminder of the commitment they had made. Daniel was by her side, his hand gently resting on the small of her back, as he introduced her to relatives, friends, and business partners who had come to share the evening. His smile was genuine, proud, the kind of smile that had drawn her to him in the first place, making her believe in love after years of doubt. The clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation filled the hall as more guests arrived. Emma's mother fussed over her, adjusting a strand of hair that had escaped her neat bun, whispering that she looked beautiful. Her best friend Clara teased her about the spotlight, joking that Emma had always hated being the center of attention. But tonight she was glowing. Everywhere she turned, she saw warmth and cheer, and for a while, she let herself believe that nothing could touch this happiness. But beneath the music, the laughter, and the golden glow, something darker was already beginning to stir, though she had no way of knowing it yet. She felt a gentle tap on her shoulder and turned to see Richard, Daniel's father, standing with a glass of champagne in his hand. His smile was polite, his voice smooth as he congratulated her. But there was something in his eyes Emma had never quite been able to understand. They always carried a weight, a sharpness hidden beneath their warmth, as if he were studying her, measuring her in ways she couldn't grasp. Still, tonight was not the night for doubts or overthinking. She smiled back, thanking him for being there, for hosting such a beautiful evening in their honor. He raised his glass to her, but she couldn't shake the chill that crept up her spine when his gaze lingered just a moment too long. The waiters glided past with trays of champagne, placing glasses in the hands of eager guests, filling the air with the sound of bubbling fizz and clinking crystal. Emma accepted a flute, her reflection rippling faintly in the pale golden liquid. She noticed how Daniel's father leaned closer to the bar, whispering something to a server, his hand subtly adjusting a glass before placing it in the center of the tray. The motion was quick, almost unnoticeable, but Emma's eyes caught the deliberate way his fingers lingered. She frowned slightly, brushing the thought away, telling herself she was imagining things, that tonight was too beautiful for suspicion. The evening unfolded in waves of chatter and applause as Daniel's mother gave a small speech, recounting stories of her son's childhood, the mischief he used to cause, and how she had always dreamed of a day like this. Guests laughed, clapped, and raised their glasses, while Emma smiled, blushing at the way everyone's eyes turned toward her. Daniel squeezed her hand under the table, reassuring her that this was only the beginning, that their lives together would be full of such moments. The orchestra shifted to a softer melody, and couples began drifting onto the dance floor, swaying under the chandeliers as if the night belonged only to them. Emma moved among the guests, thanking them for their blessings, laughing at old stories, and letting herself be pulled into dances she hadn't planned. Yet every so often she caught Richard's eyes following her, always watchful, always just at the edge of her vision. It unsettled her, though she forced the discomfort aside, reminding herself he was just being protective, that fathers had their ways of ensuring their children's choices were right. But deep inside, The unease grew like a faint whisper, nagging at her even as she smiled for photographs and toasted with relatives. The champagne in her glass sparkled under the lights, untouched for longer than she realized. She lifted it absent-mindedly, the cool stem pressing against her fingers as she prepared to join the others in raising a toast. The crowd began to gather near the stage where the microphone stood, calling for the couple to say a few words, to speak of their love, their journey, their promises for the future. Emma's heart pounded with nervous excitement, her hands trembling just slightly as she prepared to walk forward with Daniel. The air buzzed with expectation, with happiness, with the weight of a perfect moment unfolding before everyone's eyes. But in the shadows of that perfection, danger quietly settled in, waiting for the right second to strike. Emma walked toward the stage, Daniel's hand wrapped firmly around hers, steadying her nerves as the room erupted in cheers and claps. All eyes followed them, the crowd forming a semicircle around the couple, faces glowing with curiosity and joy. The soft hum of the piano faded, replaced by the sound of glasses being lifted, champagne shimmering like liquid gold under the lights. Emma's breath hitched in her throat, her pulse quickening as she reached for the microphone. She wasn't used to speaking in front of so many people, but the warmth in Daniel's eyes gave her courage. She looked down at her glass, still nearly full, the bubbles rising like secrets trying to escape. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of Richard standing near the bar, his expression unreadable. He held his own glass casually, but his gaze never left her. It was as if he was waiting for something, expecting her to drink. Emma felt the weight of that stare press into her chest, making it harder to breathe. She told herself she was imagining it, that nerves were playing tricks on her. Yet when she lifted her glass, a flicker of hesitation crossed her mind, an instinct she couldn't explain, as if something deep inside was urging her to pause. She raised the champagne to her lips, the room holding its breath. But as the glass tilted, she caught the faintest scent, something sharp, metallic, almost bitter beneath the sweetness. Her smile faltered for the briefest moment, too subtle for anyone else to notice. Daniel, oblivious, was already preparing his part of the toast, his eyes scanning the crowd with confidence. Emma's hand trembled slightly, and she lowered the glass just before it touched her lips, pretending to adjust her hair instead. Her chest tightened with unease. That smell, that odd tang, it wasn't right. She glanced at Richard again, and for the first time, she swore she saw the corners of his mouth curve into the faintest smirk, gone as quickly as it appeared. A chill swept through her veins. She forced herself to laugh softly, pretending to clear her throat, buying time as the room waited expectantly. The microphone felt heavier in her hands, and her voice caught as she began to speak, the words sounding distant to her own ears. "Tonight is more than I could have ever dreamed," she started, her voice shaky at first before finding rhythm. She spoke about love, about family, about the journey that had led her and Daniel here. Applause broke out, warm and supportive. But behind the clapping and cheers, Emma's eyes darted back to the glass in her hand. The champagne sparkled innocently, yet every bubble rising to the surface felt like a warning. Her heart thudded as her mind replayed the moment she saw Richard at the bar, the deliberate way his hand had hovered over the glasses. Was she overthinking? Was this just the paranoia of a nervous bride-to-be? Or had she narrowly avoided something far more sinister? She smiled through her speech, masking the storm raging inside her. But with each word she delivered, she grew more certain that something was wrong, that tonight's celebration was hiding a dangerous secret beneath its glittering surface. The crowd lifted their glasses in unison, urging her to drink, to complete the ritual of the toast. Emma's fingers tightened around the stem, the golden liquid swirling gently as though daring her to take the plunge. All around her, laughter and joy filled the air, but she could feel the tension sharpening, invisible to everyone else, a quiet knife pressed against her ribs. Richard's eyes glinted in the crowd, and in that moment, Emma knew deep down this wasn't her imagination. Something was hidden in her glass, something that could change everything. Emma's smile stayed fixed, but inside, her thoughts spun faster than the chandelier's reflection on the polished floor. The crowd was watching her, expecting her to raise her glass and drink, yet every instinct in her body screamed not to. She lowered the champagne just slightly, pretending to glance at Daniel for reassurance, but her eyes flicked past him, toward Richard again. He hadn't moved, not once. He was still there, still staring, his face carved into calmness, but his eyes sharp, waiting. Her fingers trembled on the glass, and she quickly masked it with a soft laugh, saying something light-hearted about nerves. The audience chuckled, mistaking her hesitation for shyness. Daniel squeezed her hand, his warmth grounding her, but the unease clawed at her chest. She couldn't let herself drink, not until she knew what was in that glass. As the laughter in the room swelled, she set her glass down carefully on the table beside her, hiding the motion beneath the applause. She picked up the microphone again, speaking more, keeping the attention on her words so no one would notice the untouched champagne. She talked about Daniel, about how his love had changed her, about how this night meant more than any fairy tale. Her words flowed naturally, but her eyes every few moments searched the crowd for Richard. She noticed it then, the faintest shift in his expression. His jaw tightened, his brows narrowed just slightly, like a flicker of irritation quickly masked. That tiny detail confirmed what her heart already feared. He wanted her to drink. The glass wasn't just a formality, it was part of something else. Something deliberate. Emma's pulse quickened as she looked around the room, trying to ground herself in the normalcy of it all. Guests laughed and clapped. Women dabbed their eyes at her emotional words. Daniel beamed with pride beside her. No one else saw the tension threading itself invisibly between her and Richard. No one else noticed the shadow behind the sparkle of the champagne. When she finally handed the microphone back, she let the moment slip seamlessly into music again. Couples returned to the dance floor. Servers moved about with trays, and laughter rose like nothing unusual had happened. But Emma's heart was still pounding, her body trembling with a fear she couldn't yet voice. She excused herself softly from Daniel's side, claiming she needed a breath of fresh air, and stepped away from the crowd. The glass of champagne still sat untouched where she had left it. Its bubbles fizzed quietly, harmless to the eye, deadly in her imagination. She walked past it, resisting the urge to throw it aside, resisting the desire to scream what she had just witnessed. Instead, she slipped into the shadows near the terrace doors, her mind racing. She knew now. Something wasn't right. Something had been slipped into that glass, and Richard was behind it. The thought sent a shiver through her, not just of fear, but of anger. She didn't know his reason yet, didn't know why a man who was supposed to welcome her into his family would stoop to such a plan. But Emma was certain of one thing. She couldn't ignore this. If she was right, her life had almost been altered in front of everyone, disguised as a toast. If she was wrong, the risk of trusting blindly could cost her more than she was willing to lose. As the night carried on without missing a beat, Emma's suspicion hardened into determination. She would not drink, she would not confront him yet, but she would find out what Richard was hiding, and why he wanted her silenced before her new life could even begin. Emma gripped the railing of the terrace, the cool night air brushing her skin as if trying to soothe the storm inside her. Music still floated from the hall. Laughter still poured out like nothing in the world could be wrong. But her body told a different story. A strange heaviness had settled in her chest, her stomach turning as though warning her she had come too close to danger. Her throat was dry, her lips numb with nerves, and though she hadn't swallowed a single drop of that champagne, she felt weak, as if fear itself had poisoned her. She leaned against the cold stone, trying to steady her breathing, but her mind kept replaying the moment when the glass had brushed her lips. Had she inhaled something? Had a trace of it already slipped into her? Panic clawed at her ribs, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't break here, not in front of Richard, not in front of all those guests. She knew that showing weakness would give him exactly what he wanted, even if she didn't yet understand his plan. Footsteps echoed behind her, soft but deliberate. Emma's heart raced as she turned, half expecting it to be Richard. Instead, it was Clara, her best friend, stepping out with a concerned look. "Hey," Clara whispered, slipping closer. "Are you okay? You looked pale back there." Emma forced a shaky smile. "I'm fine. Just nerves, all those people watching. It's overwhelming." Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, studying her like she always did when she knew Emma wasn't telling the full truth. She didn't push, though, just offered her a reassuring squeeze on the arm before slipping back inside. But Emma could see the suspicion in her gaze, the way she lingered for a moment longer than necessary. Part of her wanted to spill everything, to confess what she had seen Richard do, what she suspected. But fear tied her tongue. How could she accuse her future father-in-law without proof? She'd sound paranoid, unstable, maybe even ungrateful on the night he had hosted her happiness. The thought made her skin crawl. Host her happiness, or orchestrate her downfall. She pressed her palms against the railing, closing her eyes. Inside, the music swelled again as the band shifted to something livelier, pulling guests back to the dance floor. She could hear Daniel's laugh, carefree and full of life, cutting through the air like a reminder of what she stood to lose. That laugh was everything she loved about him. Unburdened, hopeful, trusting. And she couldn't shatter that trust with half-formed suspicions. Not yet. Her body, however, betrayed her composure. A wave of dizziness swept over her, forcing her to grip the railing tighter. The edges of her vision darkened for a moment before clearing. A tremor passed through her legs, and for the first time, a chilling thought seared through her mind. Had she already been dosed earlier? Had Richard's plan begun before the toast? Before she even noticed the champagne? Her chest tightened, and a cold bead of sweat slid down her temple. If he wanted her gone, he had chosen the perfect night. A room full of witnesses, a celebration that could easily mask tragedy. A fainting bride-to-be, a sudden collapse. Who would question it when nerves and excitement were such easy excuses? Emma bit down on her lip, forcing herself to stay upright. The dizziness faded slowly, but the unease grew heavier. She couldn't let him see her falter. She couldn't let anyone know what she suspected until she was ready. But in that moment, standing on the terrace with the weight of invisible danger pressing on her, she understood one thing clearly. She was no longer just celebrating her engagement. She was surviving it. When she stepped back inside, her face was calm, her smile practiced, but her heart pounded like a war drum. Richard was waiting at the edge of the room, his eyes flicking toward her glass still untouched on the table. His expression was subtle, but Emma caught it, the faint trace of irritation hidden behind his charm. He wanted her to drink, and her refusal had unsettled him. That alone told her everything she needed to know. Emma straightened her shoulders and slipped her hand into Daniel's, pretending nothing was wrong, even as her body fought the tremors of fear. She had barely escaped once, but she knew the night wasn't over. Richard's plan had only just begun, and she had to be ready for whatever came next. The party continued as though nothing were amiss. Laughter spilling across the glittering hall, music rising and falling with elegance, and guests dancing as if the night belonged to joy alone. But beneath the surface, Emma's mind was unraveling thread by thread, every glance, every detail feeding her suspicion. She clung to Daniel's arm, smiling for photographs, nodding through conversations. But all the while her eyes shifted toward Richard. He moved gracefully among the guests, shaking hands, laughing in all the right places, the image of a perfect host. Yet Emma noticed the subtle tension in his movements, the tightness around his jaw, the way his gaze flickered toward her glass whenever he thought no one was watching. She began piecing together fragments, replaying every moment in her head. The way he lingered at the bar earlier, the faint metallic tang that had risen from her champagne, his sharp eyes following her every step, and now, his growing impatience as her untouched glass sat glimmering under the chandeliers. A truth was beginning to form, fragile but undeniable. Her father-in-law had a reason, a motive, one dangerous enough to risk everything on a night meant for family and love. Emma's mind spun with questions that only sharpened her fear. Why would he do this? Was it money? Control? Did he believe she wasn't worthy of Daniel? Or was there some deeper secret he was hiding, one that her presence threatened to expose? The possibilities churned in her chest like poison, but none of them made the glass in her hand less dangerous. The dizziness she'd felt on the terrace returned in small, unsettling waves, not as strong as before but enough to make her doubt herself. Had she inhaled something? Could Richard have planned for this? Something that didn't require her to drink, only to touch or breathe? Panic crept into her veins, but she forced herself to push it down. Losing control would only give him an advantage. She needed to think, to stay calm, to observe. Her gaze drifted across the room until it fell on Clara again. Her best friend's expression was sharper now, her eyes narrowing with concern each time she looked at Emma. Clara wasn't fooled. She had seen enough to know Emma was hiding something, and that tiny glimmer of understanding gave Emma a thread of strength to hold on to. If she was going to uncover the truth, she wouldn't have to do it alone. Still, she couldn't risk confronting Richard. Not here. Not yet. If she spoke up without proof, it would be her word against his, and the entire family would turn against her. Daniel adored his father, trusted him without question. To accuse Richard now would plant seeds of doubt in Daniel's heart, but if she was wrong, or appeared wrong, it could shatter everything between them before their marriage even began. The thought cut her deeper than the fear of poison. So she watched, carefully, patiently. She noticed how Richard avoided Clara's gaze, how he charmed other guests with easy laughter, but kept circling back toward her and Daniel, always close enough to intervene. She saw the faint twitch of irritation when Daniel leaned to kiss her cheek, as though her very existence tested his control. Piece by piece, Richard's mask was slipping, and Emma knew she needed only the right moment to rip it away entirely. The night grew heavier with each passing hour, her champagne glass still full, untouched, standing as a silent symbol between them. Richard's plan, so carefully orchestrated, was failing before his eyes. Emma could see the cracks forming, the way his smiles grew thinner, the way his hands flexed just slightly at his sides. She didn't have the full truth yet, but she had enough to know this wasn't about one glass of champagne. It was about something much bigger, something festering beneath the surface of this family. And as the music swelled, and Daniel twirled her onto the dance floor, Emma let herself smile, not just for the guests, not just for the love of her life, but for the fire that had begun to kindle inside her. If Richard thought he could break her with one drink, he had underestimated her. He had set his plan into motion tonight, but unknowingly, he had awakened hers. Emma would uncover the truth, and when she did, she would make sure he regretted ever trying to destroy her. The music was fading into the late hours now, guests loosening their collars, women slipping off their heels as the celebration continued in waves of laughter and chatter. Emma's body felt exhausted, but her mind was sharper than ever, wired with the tension of what she had seen, what she had smelled, and what she now knew in her bones. The untouched champagne still sat on the table, the golden bubbles fizzing into silence, a constant reminder of the secret battle unfolding in the middle of her engagement party. Richard hadn't approached her directly all evening, but his presence was constant, like a shadow she couldn't shake. Each time she looked up, he was there somewhere in the crowd, laughing too easily, smiling too perfectly, his charm painted on like a mask. She noticed how he subtly steered conversations, how he distracted Daniel with stories of family traditions and future plans, always pulling his son away at just the right moment. It wasn't coincidence, it was control. And Emma realized this wasn't just about one drink. It was about power, about keeping her silent, compliant, or worse, gone. Her suspicion now burned into conviction. Richard's plan had been real. He had meant to harm her, to erase her, maybe to make her appear weak and unfit for Daniel's future. The perfect family image he projected wasn't for her benefit. It was his shield, and she had gotten too close to piercing it. That thought didn't scare her anymore. It ignited her. Emma knew she couldn't let tonight pass without planting her own seed of resistance. Revenge wasn't just about survival. It was about taking control back, showing Richard that she wasn't the fragile woman he thought he could manipulate. If he wanted to play games in the shadows, then she would make sure she learned the rules, and then bend them until they broke. She excused herself from Daniel's side once more, slipping into the quieter edges of the hall where Clara waited. Her best friend's eyes immediately locked onto hers, searching, demanding answers Emma hadn't been ready to give earlier. This time she leaned close and whispered, her words sharp and trembling. "Something's wrong with Richard. I saw him do something to my drink." Clara's expression hardened, her playful warmth replaced with protective steel. She didn't laugh it off, didn't question Emma's fear. She believed her instantly. "Then we'll find out," Clara said firmly, squeezing her hand. It was the confirmation Emma needed, the proof that she wasn't imagining this alone, that someone else had noticed the cracks in Richard's facade. Together they slipped back toward the table where her champagne still sat untouched. Emma's pulse quickened as she stared at the glass, the golden liquid glimmering under the chandeliers like a trap waiting to be sprung. This was no longer just a suspicion in her mind. It was evidence, dangerous evidence. And if she played it carefully, she could use it to turn Richard's secret against him. As she looked across the room once more, meeting Richard's gaze in a silent standoff, Emma felt something shift inside her. She was no longer the nervous fiancée overwhelmed by the crowd, no longer the girl second-guessing her instincts. Tonight, something darker had awakened in her. A cold determination to uncover his secrets, to expose his lies, and to take back her power one careful move at a time. The engagement party might have been Richard's stage, his carefully constructed illusion of control, but he had underestimated the woman standing in its center. Emma's fear had transformed into fury, and her fury into resolve. The battle between them had only just begun, and she would make sure her revenge was delivered with the same elegance and precision as the toast she never took. The last of the guests drifted out, their laughter fading into the night as the grand hall slowly emptied. The chandeliers dimmed, the music died away, and all that remained were scattered rose petals, half-finished glasses, and the remnants of what was supposed to be a perfect evening. Emma stood at the edge of it all, her heart pounding with the weight of everything she had uncovered. The untouched champagne still gleamed on the table, a silent witness to Richard's secret plan. Richard lingered near the bar, his composure unshaken, his mask still firmly in place. To anyone else, he looked like a gracious host seeing off his guests. But Emma could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes cut toward her one last time. He knew she hadn't fallen for his trick. He knew she had seen him. But instead of fear, she felt a surge of triumph pulse through her veins. He had tried to silence her, and he had failed. Daniel, oblivious to the storm beneath the surface, wrapped his arm around her waist, kissing her temple, whispering about how perfect the night had been. Emma leaned into him, her smile soft but her eyes sharp. She wouldn't tell him yet, not until she had proof. Protecting Daniel meant being patient, biding her time, and letting Richard believe he still had the upper hand. That was the only way to make her revenge work. Clara caught her gaze from across the room, giving her the smallest nod, a silent promise that Emma wasn't in this alone. That single look steadied her, gave her the courage to carry her secret for now. Together they would find the truth. Together they would unmask Richard's motives. Emma reached for her glass, not to drink, but to lift it high, her movements deliberate, controlled. Richard's eyes narrowed as he watched her. She clinked her glass gently against Daniel's, letting the sound echo through the quiet hall. She didn't take a sip, just held it in the air, her gaze locking with Richard's across the room. It wasn't a toast. It was a message. He wanted her gone. But she was still standing. And now the game had changed. Emma wasn't just his son's fiancée anymore. She was his enemy, his mirror, his reckoning. And with every secret he had tried to bury, she would dig deeper, sharper, until he regretted ever underestimating her. The engagement party had ended, but for Emma, it was only the beginning. The glass of champagne had remained untouched, but the taste of revenge was already burning on her tongue.